Hello, good evening and welcome to yet another edition of Face the Nation. The prominent novelist and poet Abirjani once said that discourse and critical thinking are essential tools to securing progress and democracy in society. But in the end, it is unity and engaged participation that will make that progress happen. So do we have unity and engaged participation in Sri Lanka's political discourse? That's our topic of discussion today, shaping the political discourse in Sri Lanka post-2020. To discuss this topic, we are joined this evening by three eminent guests. Let me quickly introduce them to you. We have Miss Attorney at Law Kanishka Vitarna, who's been on this program several times before. Thank you very much, Mr. Vitarna, for joining us this evening as well and sharing your expertise with us. We also have Attorney at Law Lihini Fernando. She's a member of the Moratuwa Municipal Council representing the Samagi Jana Balawege. And we have Mr. Mahesh Senanayaka, who is a candidate from the Kandy district at the recently concluded general election representing the United National Party. Thank you, all three of you, for joining us on the program this evening. Let me quickly start this evening's program with Mr. Kanishka Vitarna, Attorney at Law. Kanishka, we've seen a lot of talk within the government in the run-up to the election and now after on the need for amending the Constitution. Actually, there are two camps here. One camp that's calling for an amendment to the Constitution, another that is calling for an entirely new Constitution. Both camps within the current ruling Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna itself. I'm not going to ask you what the SLPP's priorities are. I want to ask you what you think their priorities should be when it comes to constitutional amendment.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me, first of all, for this again. Now, the talk, as you said, is there are two versions. Recently, the most recent version is that the government is trying to go for an amendment to the Constitution. They say going for the 20th Amendment by amending some parts of the existing 19th Amendment as well as the 18th Amendment. So that is the position now expressed by some parties of the government, especially the newly appointed Ministry of Justice. But there's another expression, another view. It's not, last observers and the papers carries another view by another minister saying that there's a possibility that we might go thereafter for a new constitution altogether. That is, there's a possibility that we can go for a referendum. If there's a need for a referendum, that means that's an indication that there will be an attempt or there will be a move to go for a new constitution altogether after the 20th Amendment that comes as an intermediary or temporary measure. But apart from that, there are some nationalist movements. For example, NJC have now come out with a statement saying that we should not limit the forthcoming amendment only to the 19th and 18th Amendment. You have to go to the 13th Amendment as well. So that's another view that by the nationalist movement who have supported the president, His Excellency, as his presidential candidate. So there are various opinions.
What's your view, Kanishka? Do you feel that which of these camps do you find yourself in?
So 19th Amendment is itself, if you take the two amendments, the 13th Amendment and the 19th Amendment, both are, in my view, are not originated from our land, our soil. Those are imposed on us, those are entrusted on us against our will. The purpose of both this amendment is to destabilize the state and the government, because by the 13th Amendment, 13th Amendment, you introduce provincial councils. The provincial councils is a unit which is artificially created. It's not a unit which is
Kasha, we'll get into the provincial councils because we haven't had provincial councils. But when you say that the 19th Amendment was imposed...
My short answer for both of this, provincial council by decentralization weaken the central parliament. 19th Amendment by try to diffuse the strength, the power of the president, the executive head. So the ultimate objectives of both are focusing on weakening the state or go for a failed state. So that's why we have to revive both of them.
Does imposing checks and balances on the president, is that equal to weakening the state?
No, it's not. The purpose of 19th Amendment is not that. It has deviated, it has divided the head of the executive into two. That's why
we'll get into this in the question and answer session as well. Thank you, Attorney at Law Kanishka Vitarna, for stating your position on this sort of controversial subject. We'll get back into this. Lini, I'd like to come to you next. We're hearing a lot about constitutional amendments. There are rumors or reports going around rather that provincial council elections may be just around the corner. Being from the opposition, Samagi Jana Balawege, let me ask you, do you think that the government, the newly elected government, has got its priorities straight?
I think first of all, I want to thank you for inviting me again here. Something which we need to think is now we are coming out of a COVID situation, a pandemic situation. And the economy, I would say, is in shambles to a larger extent. Budgets have not been passed. So there are government's priorities. What are government's priorities? Easy to go for another election and to secure power. Because now, if you really think they have already got the mandate of the people, 2/3, which is enough for them to pass the relevant laws and get the country on the right track. I think that should be the mandate because that should be the focus of the government. Because by going into another election, they are trying to strengthen their political mechanism, I would say, because we know that Sri Lanka, the parliamentary, the provincial and the municipal councils, is the three-tiered political structure. So by getting this layer, they are trying to fill in another set of representatives. So is that paramount importance for a country at this point is a question.
Lini, let me ask you this question. When the government that the current SJB leadership was also part of back then, they didn't hold the provincial council elections at all. Provincial council elections are long overdue right now. Those councils have not been functioning at all for, well, some of them for a couple of years now. So the argument that the SLPP that they shouldn't prioritize provincial council elections is moot, isn't it? No, because it should be a priority given that it's not been held for 2 years.
One of the reasons that it was getting prolonged is because of the legislature. They were trying to amend the legislature because they amended it for the local councils and they were trying to amend it. So that was in debate and in motion in parliament. So that was one of the reasons why it was getting prolonged for a while. And also they were trying to bring in the representation of youth representation, female representation of 25% quota. So all these changes, and also in terms of this whole preferential voting system, they were debating on that also, like area-based voting system, so that you regularize this whole election mechanism, I would say. So those were a couple of the objectives that the government was looking at. Hence, that was also one of the reasons why it got prolonged.
And was it a stalling mechanism to
I don't think so. I don't think so, because SJB United National Party was always for democracy and always was standing for democracy and for the mandate of the people. So I don't think that was one of their intentions.
Because if you look at it from a public perception point of view, the local government elections were delayed, eventually held in 2018. In 2017, I think October or November, the Provincial Council Elections Amendment Act was passed. A 3-page bill somehow turned into a 70-plus page, fully fledged out act
and
at the committee stage in violation of Parliament standing orders. So when you look at the manner in which the legislative reforms that you're calling for, I'm not arguing about the need for those reforms. The manner in which it's done looks like political horse trading intended to delay the election?
So let's say this way, okay, they did it at that point, now we've got a new government. Now is it the time, do we need to go for it? So people maybe, didn't want that government that time, they were voted out. So now, is it the time to go for a provincial council just to strengthen the SLPP mechanism, or should we relook at stabilizing the country? That I think government needs to think through. And may I have a little time to discuss
sure.
on the cabinet? I want to highlight this very clearly today, because I, being a female here, and I think it's important that we raise this question. We are extremely disappointed of the fact that the cabinet ministry of women and child affairs has been removed by this present government, because it was always a cabinet ministry since the year 1997, and now it has been reduced to a state ministry, and it has been coupled up by women and children's affairs, pre-primary schools, school infrastructure and educational services. This pre-primary schools is a function again of the provincial council. Now they have brought it in here. So now, is it a violation of the constitution? Now that's a question to be debated. Now we know that women are 52% of the population. Children are 1/4 of the population. So we're talking about 80% of the population. Their rights have been completely disregarded, and also the fact that it is been granted to a male minister. Now it is debatable why it is, but actually there are two ladies there, Honorable Pavitra Wanyarachi, Darshini Fernando Pulle, who has worked in women's caucuses, who has debated severely on these women's issues. Now why is it being put to the back burner? Now we know Sri Lanka has ratified the CEDAW Convention, the Convention of Elimination of Discrimination Against Women, then the United Nations Convention of Child Rights. There were a lot of policy mechanisms that were done by the previous government, Honorable Chandrani Bandara, where they had parliamentary sectoral committees where policies were drafted in terms of revising the section 2005 number 34. The act, it was being revised. So, and also the mechanisms of implementation needs to come into place. Now, these are the things that this government needs to consider, but everything has been put to the back burner. So, what about the rights of women and the child? Is it of not importance? So, I think as a female, I think the females of this country needs to question this from the government, and I'd like to urge that now they've only appointed 28 cabinet ministers. There's another 2 more slots. Please give the cabinet ministry of women back again, and you have 8 elected representatives, and one of them should be appointed as the minister.
Thank you very much, Lihini Fernando, attorney at law and also member of the Moratuwa Municipal Council representing the Samagi Jana Balawegaya. Next, we have Mahesh Senanayake, candidate of the United National Party from the Kandy district at the recently concluded general election. Mahesh, we were talking about elections and delaying of elections. It was your party that was leading the government at the time, and now your party has 1 seat in parliament. Do you think that is a reflection of the public's frustration with the UNP?
Well, thank you very much for inviting me once again for Face the Nation, and I'm privileged. I think in this panel I am the only person who has this experience of contesting the general elections and how things turn and how the public opinion really worked on the ground. Well, we have to concede the fact that the public perception towards UNP has changed. That is why there were a lot of people boycotting the elections, and after the elections we realized that as much as 4.8 million people did not vote, and about 700,000 votes were rejected. So that was a clear indication of the interest of the people for voting a party into power. So this is a period of learning for United National Party, as this was never expected by the party at any level. However, we observe the fact that the people have probably chosen the SLPP government to form SLPP government, given the fact that the president is also from SLPP. Maybe due to the fact that during the good governance period that we had a president from a different party and a government from another party, and there were a lot of bone of contention. There were a lot of hullabaloo between the two parties, even though they were solved in a very amicable manner. Now, if you look at the height of that was the 2018, the constitutional crisis, during which 52 days of the country was wasted, and no one did a calculation as to how much of money we lost. 52 days out of 365 days is it's a massive loss. But the man who executed that loss today is back in parliament. But however, the party who promoted good governance in the best interest of the country has been rejected by the people due to various reasons. So for UNP, it is a period to learn the public opinion and reflect on ourselves how to bounce back, how to win the public opinion, and again to be back on the saddle. So that is what we are right now doing.
Mahesh, if the provincial council elections are held, let's say as soon as January, potentially, would you be looking forward to contest at the provincial council elections for the central province?
Myself?
Yeah.
Of course, I mean I can't desert the people who supported me, because if you look at the rejection of UMP vote base, or rather the UMP voters that they didn't come to the polling booth and voted due to various reasons. One was mainly due to the division between the UNP. I mean, they didn't like it because UNP voters are die-hard followers of the party, and they vote for a reason. They don't vote for persons, you know. But this time, because of the division within the two parties, people didn't. I mean, it affected us badly, and it affected SJB.
Do you think that concept of there being a large UNP block vote, do you feel that that's a political myth?
Well, I don't think so. It is yet to study, Majid. I mean, we need to study and see how this the basis of different parties would work in the next.
But don't you think that the results of the election, of this election, and also of the presidential election, and then potentially at the next election as well, because the changes that were sort of not promised, but that were being talked about immediately after the election loss of the UNP, those changes are not materializing, at least not in terms of the very highest position in the party. Do you feel that we're witnessing a sort of tectonic shift in the political landscape in Sri Lanka, and that parties like not only the United National Party but also the Sri Lanka Freedom Party have, in the eyes of the public at least, become irrelevant?
It's not being irrelevant. I think these two, the oldest political parties, have to put into practice what they have learned during the past 2 decades, especially because past 2 decades of elections have been more or less based on the alliances. You know how parties successfully to get other parties to work together. So what I feel is for UNP, it is the right time for UNP to infuse fresh blood, new people like us, and come up with a plan to win the public back. So that is the challenge that is posed against us, for which we are working now.
Thank you, Mahesh Senanayake, candidate for the Kandy district at the recently concluded general election representing the United National Party. I now open the floor for questions from our two journalists joining me this evening, Jaimal Ratnayake and John Fernando. But before we get into the Q&A, a quick reminder to our panelists this evening as well that you bear full responsibility for any allegations that are leveled against any person or against any individual who is not here today. Jaimal, let's start with you, given that you're joining us on the program after a long hiatus.
Thank you, Nadim, and very good evening to our eminent guests. My first question would be directed at Attorney-at-Law Lihini Fernando. Now, you being a female and you bringing up the fact that the female population makes up 52% of the total mass of Sri Lanka. We saw at the recently concluded general election and thereafter, when the cabinet appointments and state ministerial portfolios were given out, only 3 women representing the cabinet and the state ministries were appointed. Yeah. How has the SJB advocated the representation of women in giving out nominations, or was it on the part of the voters that they were not voted into parliament, or they weren't given the certain number of votes that were required for them to make the cut into parliament? What is your opinion on that?
So, out of the entire list of women that contested from SJB, around 20 ladies were running around the country. Personally, I would think that number should increase. But if you take now the conventional political mechanism and the structure, how conducive it is for a woman to come and run a parliamentary election is a question. So though there are women who are potential, but the mechanism of running an entire district, the budgets Do they have the budgets to run? And that is a bit of a question. So that those are one of the reasons why the women would take a back step. But that doesn't mean that women don't want to run for office. Women do want to run for office. So that's why now the Samagi Taruna Balawegya, they have brought in saying that 25% quota will be given for youth representatives going forward. So they will bring in this whole 25% mechanism for ladies as well. So I think the political structure in Sri Lanka should change to a larger extent. Something that I personally advocate is this bringing of campaign financing act, where you bring a cut and you say, these are this is the budget that you can spend. So I think if it's applicable across the board for all parties, I think we can regulate this preferential this system. Like we can control this method of madness, because we saw in this particular election there are some candidates who spent about, close to about 300 million budgets on just getting elections, giving out freebies, giving out all these cement bags to rice bags, distributing without an end. So now with this, how do we elect the right representatives? So these are questions. Now actually it is quite sad to note that now still this time also only 12 ladies will be there out of the 225.
Yes.
Again, we are back to 6%. But if you take the region here now, if you take countries like India, there's about 12%, about 64 ladies out of the 594 in parliament are 64 ladies. So likewise, if you take the region, the numbers are far more higher. So I think there needs to be political will across all parties to bring in female. So females, because now sadly we are 52% of the population, but to get our rights we have to go and actually debate and ask for men.
Yes.
But men must realize that women, this opportunity also needs to be given to the ladies. It is our right, and it's sad that we have to ask for it, but then I think there's a political will, and everybody, all parties together must take a stand, because it is time, because Sri Lanka, I think over the years have disregarded women until the UNP government brought in the 25% quota for the local government. It was always about 1%, 1.9% at the local councils for women representation, and
yes,
it was increased to 25%. So, and also one of the issues that we have now in parliament is now even the women's minister, a female has been appointed.
Yes.
Now, women's issues are sensitive issues. It's not that I'm saying a man doesn't understand women's issues, but there needs to be the fact of empathy, understanding it from a female's point of view, understanding it from a child's point of view. Like for example, if you take the Domestic Violence Act number 34 of 2005, which has been passed, but the actual implementation of it is a question. Now, the police, the judiciary, all these institutions need to be trained. Today, if we go to a police station and if a lady tries to file a complaint, police are quite receptive to a lady in terms of understanding. So this nationally, these issues need to be discussed. Even if you take children's rights, now we know that child abuse is increasing. Now, if you take female harassment, at least about 90% of the females are harassed in some way in Sri Lanka. That is the reality. Now, also if you take about Middle East women who are contributing to the economy of Sri Lanka, what about their rights? Estate women, widow women in the north, what about their rights? Now, these are factors that needs to be debated, policies need to be brought in. So, this is why we say the importance of having women to debate these things in parliament, and getting rights is not something that is going to cost a lot to the government. It is. But
yes, do you feel like the voters
yes,
of the country have their reservations about electing women into such high offices? We are a country who have had women, including Ms. Bandaranaike and then Santika Bandaranaike, but do you think that there needs to be a change in the mindset of the voters to know that the women do have the same capabilities as men to hold high offices and to progress forward?
So there was a campaign that was carried out this time. Out of the 3 votes, give 1 vote to a woman. So it was strongly advocated by a lot of ladies organizations, NGOs and all. I think what you're saying is right to an extent, because women must also vote for women. That thinking needs to be brought in, and also more women who understand the women's issues also need to be coming. Not just have women for the sake of having, but women who understand and who can make significant contribution. But I think now the women in the political arena, I think I speak for all women across all parties. Now, if I take the MPP is not present here today, but then you see a lot of good women being fled into that party, and even through the SJB. So I think women's issues women need to lobby collectively to win it for women. And I think even this getting 25% in parliament, women need to lobby for it. And I think going forward, government needs to hear this out very clearly and give this right to the women. But sadly,
Kanishka, do you feel that the Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna government is ignoring, as Leni claims, ignoring the plight of 52% of the population?
No, not at all. If you take the gazette that give give the particular ministries the respective powers, the allocation. Now it is done by the president. Okay, constitutionally it's the duty of the president, but as a government, we say the government has done this allocation. It is a state ministry, that is correct. But how can you talk about a woman without considering his environment, where he is living? You can't talk about a woman without talking about a child. Because child is an essential part of it. It's a child.
So that's why there was a cabinet ministry for women's and children's.
Children. Now this is a cabinet. This is a state ministry, of course, but it can function as a cabinet ministry. Take the entirety of this gazette.
The state minister P.R. Nishanta is not a cabinet minister. He doesn't have that. He can't raise those issues in.
He's accountable, no? Accountable.
Unless he's invited.
Now let me take it. Let me answer it in this way. If you take this gazette and how the classification is done, how the assignment is being made to various ministries and state ministries, each minister and the state minister is given a specific task and priorities. So now when you take the state ministry in relation to women affairs and children, it is assigned with specific tasks and priorities. This is unusual. This is a special feature you can see in this particular gazette, which is different from the previous allocation of function.
How is it different, Mr.
Because they are given priorities. There are 14 main priorities.
Mr. Vitan, I think the point that Leni is making is that the subject of women's rights, women's needs, the unique issues that are faced by women in Sri Lanka will no longer have a voice in the cabinet of ministers. So regardless of how specific the state ministry is in its functions, there is no cabinet representation for the unique challenges, issues faced by women and
this
children.
State minister is coming under the Minister of Education. So Minister of Education is a cabinet minister. So this is the executive power of this country flows from starting from the president through the ministers, cabinet of ministers, ministry. So it's accountability is there.
Don't you feel that it's problematic that the subject of women's and children's affairs has been lumped in
you can see in this gazette, if you go through this gazette, see what are the laws which are related, which are functional, which are applicable to in relation to the women. There's only one law. There are only 4 laws given in this schedule. Go through it, there's only one law which is directly related to the women's affairs or rights. That is this.
Kanishka, do you feel that the SLPP has an understanding of the challenges faced?
No, my concern is, my issue is this. We must now first go for new laws, because now if you go through the laws, you get only one law which has in.
But Mr. Vitana, this is the problem again. How can you go for the new laws when you don't have those, when that issue is, when those issues are not being given a voice in cabinet, when the cabinet minister, when there is no cabinet minister to lead the legislative reform, maybe there is need for legislative.
Why you say it's wrong to say that there's no voice in the cabinet, because the cabinet is voice. The voice is carried by the minister. There's a minister.
We don't want to be under the education. We were a standalone ministry, and
that is you can be. That is not an excuse. You can't say that is not a bar to be to the efficiency of a ministry.
You were also saying that the 14 responsibilities. May I bring your attention to the 4th point of that? It says giving birth to healthy children who will be brought up under the care of strong motherly love. So now things like this, very sensitive issues to women. They are highlighting it in a very derogatory manner, so which itself shows that their understanding of the women's rights. And what about factors like women empowerment? Where are they captured? Where are those aspects being captured in this point?
So those are for the first time you get priorities in the gazette. They are gazetted, not in
My point is this: we were always a cabinet ministry, and we should not have been reduced to a state ministry, which I think is a clear insult for the 52% and also for the
there's
children
no
of this
bar, there's nothing preventing from getting the state minister, this women's rights of concerns to be expressed in the cabinet of ministers, because there's a cabinet minister.
No longer will it have the priority as
just
having a cabinet ministry,
no,
because here it is coupled up under preschool education and infrastructure.
So it is something related to the women. No. How can you talk about rights of women without talking about children?
No, but
children is an essential part of the women.
So that's why it's coupled with exactly. That's why we had a separate minister to bring these issues, and now you all have.
So that is ministry is there, Minister of Education
is a clear result and a lack of understanding on women's issues, and not being sensitive towards women's policies, which is a contribution to a progressive state.
This is a political allegation without no basis, because there's a cabinet minister involved. There's a cabinet minister. The state minister comes under the cabinet minister.
But Kanishka, however, even though
the cabinet minister can represent.
What right state minister would have to go and make representation to a cabinet?
So the cabinet minister is there to represent.
Are you all going to invite state minister to come and make the presence of the cabinet? I mean, it is equal to what Maithripala Sirisena did. No, during the 2018, one of the allegations during the Saharans attack was that Maithripala Sirisena did not invite the then Prime Minister to the Defence Council, but he invited his political stooges to the Defence Council, or he invited his political henchmen. So are you all finding a pretext in that kind of scenario, and are you going to tell the country that as Lihini pointed out, okay,
and education has four areas, four clear areas, and
so what's your point? I mean,
no, the point is, what power would state minister have to go and demand certain things for women and children from the cabinet?
The powers are there. The powers are given by the Gazette. The powers are flowing from the cabinet ministers.
Kanishka, with all due respect to Constitution says the supreme body is the cabinet minister.
Cabinet minister.
Yeah.
Our question, it's a simple question we ask just to clarify the government's position with regards to.
This is a
if it's opposition, you all can rectify it.
Yeah,
no, I mean, you take from this point of it, the head of the state executive is the president. Now, president's power is delegated to the cabinet of ministers. Just because of the delegation, the president, you can't say the president will lose his powers. Like that, the delegated powers of the cabinet of ministers will be functioned or executed through the state ministers. But actually, it is the minister in the cabinet.
So does the cabinet minister have an understanding, the cabinet minister of education, who I believe is
Professor G.L. Piris.
Professor G.L. Piris.
Yeah.
Do you think that Professor G.L. Piris has a great understanding of the challenges, of the unique challenges and issues facing women in Sri Lanka?
He is an experienced,
I'm not talking about his political experience, or his legal
and he's a knowledgeable professor.
His credentials as a Rhodes
you
scholar.
can't say that he doesn't have any knowledge on this.
So you say there is a state minister and there is a cabinet minister. Both are men. Do either have an understanding of the unique challenges facing women in Sri Lanka?
It's an objective. It's
For example,
test. I can't say that. How can I test it?
Or the cabinet minister had ever had to face an issue, let's say that a majority of women in Sri Lanka, a lot of women that I know, women in my family who have also had to go through this, you can't use public transport. Do you think that the minister or the honourable minister or the honourable state minister have ever been through a situation like that to be able to even empathize?
I can't answer here on assumptions or something.
It's not an assumption. This is something
but I can give a
I'm sure as Lihini would also testify. This is something that a majority of women in Sri Lanka go through. Harassment, gender-based violence. If you look in a lot of areas in single-parent households where women war widows, the problems that they face. Why is it that the government is unable to give a fair voice to 52%?
It is given a fair voice. Why you say that they are not given a fair voice? The voice is there because there's a cabinet of it comes on the cabinet, the ministry. Only there's a subclass of the state ministry. Because of the state minister, you can. Supposing if you remove the state ministry and entrust this to the minister, so what's different? You have a
dedicated ministry
And
for women's and children's
That is the assumption, no? You
it's
can't
not
say
an
there's some
assumption, it's not-
efficient, you can't judge the
but
efficiency of a minister or a minister because of the work.
No, it's about having a dedicated
dedicated
ministry. I mean,
ministry.
we have dedicated state ministries now for clay, for chili, for turmeric.
This is a
We don't-
dedicated
and
ministry for
Is
women's
that
affairs.
the value that we're giving women in Sri Lanka?
But
So there's fair
and also,
value.
Can't give them
how
a
is
dedicated
education
cabinet.
and women's and child affairs synonymous with each other? Because women and
My
children
God,
are
my friend,
humans. and-
without child's education, what's the ambition of a mother? We are talking about mothers
But
also.
women are a
we
different
are
segment of
not
society.
talking only
What
about
about
single,
women who are not
single women.
called by the
What about women who are not mothers?
Yes.
Yeah.
Isn't women,
Majid,
aren't
can I-
women
can I
a separate
intervene here?
segment
Yeah,
of society?
Majid, what I
You
know-
can't
see-
segregate it.
see,
It's
Mr.
a
Kanishka,
voice of
this is what I feel. Now, the UNP government, whenever UNP was in power, UNP gave prominence to women and child affairs, which no one can deny. Lihini, no
Yeah,
one can
yeah.
deny. Now, if you look at from a political angle, I feel this is travesty of justice. Majid, during the election campaigns, it was mostly the women who supported SLPP. During their day-to-day campaigns, in Kandy, I witnessed it. At the promise of maybe some sahanadhara, some relief, some rice bag, or job, or a school to a child. That were the promises given by the SLPP, and it was the women who actually maneuvered SLPP campaigns. Since Mr. Gotabaya Rajapaksa was appointed, even Mr. Mahinda Rajapaksa's best backing comes from Wahoo, for matriarchal dominant family setup in Sri
Yes,
Lanka.
correct.
So, what we want to clear is, if it is an omission, yes, government can rectify that in the best interest of women. Women at large, not only UMP followers, not only SLP followers, because this is a severe issue, because we see raising of an ugly head that is attacking women and child interest on a daily basis. So
Mahesh, to add
this
to
is
that, now let's focus on the public opinion for a second. While we mentioned that majority of the population of Sri Lanka, 52% of the population are women, equals that majority who voted during the general election are women. Kanishka, do you think the people in the country, the general public, are satisfied with the decision of the government appointing the responsibilities of women and children to...
So there's no
Well,
allegation as what's the scientific basis of your argument now? Now 52% of men, women, if you say, so other remaining part are men. So nobody is asking for a separate cabinet ministry for men. No? So likewise, there are concerns, there are issues that only the men are facing with in this country. So I mean, like that, these are the cabinet, the
So there are
responsibility.
28 cabinet ministers today with...
No,
Majority are
let
men,
me,
majority
don't
are
disturb me. There are that is a collective, the man,
I mean,
the
I'm appalled by
no,
this
let me finish, don't disturb. The cabinet, the purpose of the cabinet is the government. Government is collectively responsible to the people and the parliament, and collectively have concerns or deals with the issues of the people. So people in the entirety of the country. So I mean, in that scenario, all the ministers are engaged in all the issues of all the women in the country. So I mean, you are addressing the issues of the women. Now, apart from that, there's a special state ministry to deal with women as well as other issues related to the women. For example, child's education, preschools, and so
But
forth.
Kanishka, we were talking about
isn't it
this
right?
public perception, right? I mean, there is a state ministry, as you just mentioned, to deal with women's issues with women's affairs, along with children's affairs, preschool, so on and so forth. We've given this, the level of importance that we've given this subject is state ministry. It's the same level of importance that we've given clay, chili, turmeric, and batik, for example.
Clay, those are the
The question
indigenous,
is that the
no?
level of
No,
importance that the government places on the subject of women's affairs?
That is your perception, my friend.
That is
Because
a fact.
you say, if you take clay is a national industry of majority of the population. Now you can't give a secondary.
This is the same level that it's not that it's wrong. I'm not saying that it's wrong to have state ministry
the level
for clay and batiks and for everything
level
else.
is not.
If they succeed, good for the country. But is this the same level of importance that you're giving to
The level
women's
is not
affairs?
decided by the state, whether it's a state ministry or not. Its level is decided by the function and the priorities. and the functionality, the functioning of that ministry. So I mean, there are laws involved. The laws you have to, if you take the laws, they are of equal level. You have to give same priority to the functioning or the implementation of the laws. I mean, this argument has no basis as such, because
Thank you,
just
Kanishka.
placing it under a state ministry doesn't give a second grade state.
Thank you, Kanishka. I'll give Lihini 1 minute. I'd like to move beyond the subject of women's affairs as well, and I'll give Lihini 1 minute to end this discussion.
I'm extremely appalled by the factor of this kind of statement, because it shows that there is the lack of understanding of women's issues in this country and how it is being perceived by the SLPP, which is, I think, is a clear indicator to the people of this country that we, the 52% and the 1/4 of the population of the children, are being, sidelined and cornered, and our rights and our voices will not be heard for the next 5 years, which is a very sad situation. So I'd like to make an appeal on behalf of all the women and the children that a separate cabinet ministry for women be established, and also significant budgets be allocated towards the well-being of women, and also passing the laws. I think it's one of the first things that this government should do and must do, because laws getting women's rights in track does not cost anything to the government, and it is important that we from the outside will make our voice heard. And I hope that President and the Prime Minister and also the 8 elected SLPP representatives voice this in Parliament, because if this is not addressed, I think for the next 5 years, the rights should not be in the back.
There are two things I want to. There are two
I'd
things
like
I
to move
want
beyond this subject.
No,
we're going round in circles.
No, I want to have emphasize on the two things. Give me 30 seconds. One is I'm not representing the official view of the SLPP. That's what I want to emphasize. Second, because there may be other scientific reasons behind this assignment. Okay. The second thing is the laws. As far as laws, we have to first think of laws. There should be more laws to come in. So for making laws is a duty of the Parliament. The whole Parliament is responsible, because there are very little number of laws which deals with the affairs of the rights of the women.
Thank you, Mr. Kanishka. We're hopeful that the 12 women MPs who have been elected and who have been also elected from the national list will raise these issues in Parliament. So, Jayamal John, moving beyond the subject of women's affairs, just to ensure that we're not going around in circles. Over to you again.
Thank you, Nadeem. I would like to direct, like you mentioned, our argument into a different direction. I believe, Mr. Kanishka, you're the most eligible person to answer this question that I'm going to post. Take into consideration the book which was published by you in 2016 on the Buddha Sasana and the country's future and the constitution. Correct me if I'm wrong. We know at the moment we have an issue in the country pertaining to the parliamentary seat for the Power of People party. We know we have issue at the moment, and then we have the chief incumbent of the Mihintale Rajama Vihara urging the public or the people to avoid from voting for Buddhist monks at upcoming elections. My question, streamlining my question, what sort of representation does religious leaders have when it comes to politics? Should religious leaders be in political positions, or should they run for office? What sort of effect do they have on the political sphere in the country?
This is a matter that we can go into deep and go for lengthy discussions. I mean, I can give a talk for about say 1 or 2 hours, because the basis of that book is we have to consider, when you take the science or the philosophy or the jurisprudence under Article 9, it relates to the constitution that prevailed for over 2,500 years in this country, where the Buddhist monk played a role in the governance and the government. But where they create a triangle, where the public, Buddhist monk and the king, they create a triangle-like relationship among themselves. That's how the sovereignty has flown among these three in a circular manner. So both are checking and balancing the powers among each other. So and all three have some sort of control over each other. So that's how it functions. But here in the Westminster system, it's a totally alien system of governance that been introduced by the Western to our country. That's why these so many problems are involved in us, where Justice Veeramantri says these systems and the laws are alien to the people. People cannot understand them. That's why there's always a violation of laws are there. The people cannot understand them. There's a rule of law cannot be maintained. So there's a big reason for that. That's why the Mr. Gunadas Amarasekara has come up with another view that we have to go for a civilized constitution, Sabhyat Raj. In the new constitution, if you are making a new constitution, we have to absorb and get principles of constitution, our own constitution principles from our jurisprudence, which had been prevailed for 2,500 years, which is blended with or mixed with, which is nourished with Buddhist philosophy. So that is it. That is different from this conduct of these 2-3 bhikkhus. That is there in that exercise. They have become part of the individuals who with ego and self-centered concerns. But it is different from the broader perspective of going for a constitution with our own principles, our own constitutional jurisprudence that had been prevailed for centuries in this country.
Thank you, Mr. Vitanarage. My next question is directed to you, Mahesh. I would like to highlight on something that former Prime Minister of Singapore once said, Mr. Lee Kuan Yew. The people of the country is responsible for who they vote for. If you vote in cheap members of parliament, the people of the country are in trouble. In general, are you satisfied about the decision that the people made during
about the
decision that the people made during the past general election?
Of the cuff? No, I'm not happy. See, people have put us out of the equation. I mean, we have only one seat in parliament, and that is something that we would very humbly concede. The people, for some reasons, have not voted for UMP candidates. Had voters in Kandy cast, say, 40,000 votes in favor of UMP, probably me talking to you would have been in parliament today. So I am also a casualty of this public rejection or public boycott. Having said that, what I understand is a lot of people who refrained from voting did not realize that they would bestow nearly a 2/3 majority to the incumbent government. That was even a surprise to the government on the day of the election results were released. Because if you really look at under the present system, say the party who wins the number one slot gets 150,000 and the last man gets 35,000, still become a member of parliament, cannot happen unless the third force or second force pulled a higher number of votes. This is a lengthy subject that needs a bit of maths to be done. So in this context, SLPP wouldn't have expected nearly a 2/3 majority, I think 145 seats. 145. So 145 seats to be obtained during the election. So what I feel is that people who are disgruntled with the current system or due to the division between UNP, due to various reasons, they did not go out of their homes and cast the vote. So, but they never wanted to give a 2/3 majority to the government, because 2/3 majority to the current government is definitely a question mark because of the past track record. I'm not saying
Mahesh,
that.
Is that correct though? Because if you look, you had at the presidential election, President Gotabaya Rajapaksa polled about 6.9 million votes.
Yes.
And then if you look at the general election as part of the national vote, the SLPP was able to, in spite of the reduced turnout due to COVID, the SLPP still managed to get, I believe, just over 6.8.
Yes, 6.8.
So it's not a big change in the number of people voting with the SLPP. So is that conclusion that you're drawing, is that correct?
No, I mean,
because it looks like the SLPP is
it's arguable. It's arguable. Now, say, as you said, what I feel is like the SLPP followers, SLPP voters, they went in numbers and cast the vote. But the other voters who would have voted for UNP, or I always consider SJB and UNP enjoy the same vote base. Even Malimava, that's NPP, right?
NPP.
They also lost certain voters due to due to many reasons. So what I feel like 4.8 million people who didn't go to vote would have probably voted either to UNP, SJB or Malimawa.
But does that indicate deviousness on the part of the SLPP or failures on the part of the opposition?
Yet to study, because see,
But is it yes
I know,
to study?
I know,
If
what
the UNP, SJB and JJB were unable to interest the voter enough to get the voter out to the polling booth, are they a viable opposition force?
I think
Collectively or as individuals?
I have a different dimension to this. I think the people of this country should understand a general election is the most important election because they send 225 people to represent them in parliament, right? President election is about one person. So there's clear division between executive and the legislator. That is why there is a clear division among these two and checks and balances. So when people do not go and vote at the general election, unlike in other countries, that means they would probably allow wrong people to go to parliament for wrong reasons. So my learning and my request to all beloved Sri Lankans is never do this mistake. Now this time 4.8 million Lihini, 4.8 million, maybe SLPP could have got more votes, had 4.8 million, or at least 3 million people went and voted. So my plea, my request to our generation is never forget to vote, especially at a general election, because it would not reflect the country's majority view. So even for us, it is premature to comment on the government business because we are yet to see what government would do.
But
let me add from SJB point of view now. SJB coming in with about 3 months campaigning and securing 54 seats, I think is a good start for a fresh party with like limited with all the challenges and all the issues that we had with the division. Had we come together, the situation I think would have been far more different. And the people and the voter confidence would have also been different, but again it's debatable because the policies of both parties and the leadership issues. But I think as Mahesh pointed out, there's an issue because 4.7 million people didn't vote, and knowing it's a general election and you're electing a government for the next 5 years, how politically knowledgeable and savvy are the people of this country is something that is questionable. Because now, is it all this is because of welfare politics, or is it that because people don't understand the policy, or people don't read the policies, or are people merely saying, okay, we want a strong fist to control the country?
Lini, can you really point the finger at the people and mention that
no,
people
I'm
made
just
the wrong
taking, not
decision?
pointing a finger.
Because
Just
take into consideration the
it's not
track record of your two parties. We saw a crisis going through inside the party even during the presidential election.
Yes,
you had clearly divisions, and right now...
Just to add to what John is saying, when you say that the voter has a lack of understanding, voter this thing, don't you feel that that's part of the problem with the SJB and the UMP is that you're unable to appeal to this?
No,
are you underestimating the intelligence of the voter?
We did have an issue. Had we come together, the situation I think would have been far different. So there was an issue that which we all need to admit. So and also there's a responsibility on the voters' part as well to about their being politically savvy and the knowledge and understanding of the importance.
John, what I tried to point out was so we admit that our division.
I'll come to you in just a minute. I'll come to you in just a minute.
The division in the party, of course, has affected us. Both fractions. Yes. That is something that we have to agree, right? Because the loyal, die-hard UMPs didn't go to vote because of this issue. So, but as Lihini said, with all due recognition to SJB, they have won 54 seats.
Which is commendable.
And that 54 seats also they drew from the UNP vote base.
But Mahesh, do you feel like the volatility within the UNP led to those floating votes not being cast towards UNP?
That's what I'm trying to explain. Now the loyal UMPers didn't go, and UMPers which reflect SJB and UMP didn't go to vote. So that is the interest of the Sri Lankan voter. We are not blaming them. I clearly said at the outset of this answer, I said I am making a plea and a request to the younger generation. It is our bound and duty to go and cast our vote. As I said, Mr. Kanishka, had 3 million or 3.5 million gone and casted their vote. I was at the counting center. I saw how the ballot papers were ruined and scribbled and rejected. Probably you all would have also got 2 or 3 more seats. But what I am trying to say to the younger generation is that general election is not something that you can say, Machang, I was not able to go and cast the vote. That holiday is not given for people to go on a picnic and have fun.
But also, don't you feel like that preconceived notion of there being loyal UNP supporters that they will vote for any sort of candidate that is fielded? Don't you think that mindset has gone away now? The generation that is coming in to society, they are more insightful. They are more based on research. They will find out to see what an actual candidate has done for society before voting that person in. So, do you think it is pertinent to rely on that preconceived notion of, okay, we have a loyal voter base, therefore we will field anyone we want, therefore they will vote us in? Do you feel like that is the way to go forward?
Oh, definitely. I mean, UMP voters are looking into insights. They want to know the candidate, and they should have a reason for that. So that is the distinctive difference between a UMP voter and a voter for another party.
But Mahesh, now you can mention 100 things about loyal.
No, I said only one thing. No, now you all are not allowing me to answer.
No, but Mahesh, my point is actions speak louder than words.
If you all want to pick a fight and if you want to make this show, you can do that. He knows that I am a journalist. I have done your job, for 17 years. I know the trick. If you want, we can do that. So let me answer first. Now your question is, UMP voters want to know whom they vote for.
Yeah.
Definitely. So that is the major difference between a voter for UNP and a voter for another party. This is what I feel. If you look at, UNP has never tried to win people creating political bubbles. I call it a political bubble. Now, for example, our party's majority candidates and our base is Sinhala Buddhist basis, but we have never marketed it in a chauvinistic manner. But unfortunately, people think that UNP is not a Sinhala Buddhist party. And on the other hand, UMP has always fielded new faces.
But Mahesh, aren't you contradicting yourself when you say the UNP doesn't create bubbles and you've created this own little UNP bubble?
No, that's a
contradiction.
That's the issue. No, that's the issue occurred within the party, Majid. It's not a national bubble. Now, I mean, in Sri Lanka, if you look at past 10-15 years, how most of the opposition, the opposing parties that have won elections, they create bubbles. So these political people live in their own make-believe worlds because their mindset have been designed and shaped to an extent to believe in.
But we go back to the thing. Is the opposition, including the UMP, are you all underestimating the intelligence of the Sri Lankan voter?
No, never.
But would you agree that there is a conflict or there are flaws within the hierarchy of the party?
Of course, yes.
And you feel like young blood should be brought in as soon as possible without delaying it further.
No, actually part of my answer to your question was when you said whether the UMP voters didn't know who the candidates were.
Yes.
Brother, you can go and mention my name in Candy, right? Okay. So people know me,
yes.
But me contesting was not a compelling reason for them to go and vote for UNP.
Do you feel like people such as you weren't given enough support from the party?
Sorry?
Do you feel like young blood, new people weren't given enough support from within the party to reach that rank, to get a seat in parliament?
No, we are given. We were given during the elections and we tried our best. Right? It was a countrywide, I would use the word boycotting of the election. Right? I'm not saying 4.8 million were UNP supporters, but there was
certain floating votes.
Yeah, floating votes and apparent boycotting by the people. So that affected new faces like us. Right? But that is sort of a detrimental factor for us to leave politics because I feel we have a bounden duty towards the people of this country. Now, after elections, people say, Mahesh, you would have been in parliament. I know that was a fervent thought that they shared with me. But, I can't accuse them because they were not interested to go and cast their vote.
Do you feel like
I'd like to bring Kanishka in on this discussion?
Cannot find out why and how the voters have behaved in this manner. It is the judgment of the voters. They take so many various matters, issues into consideration, then they have judged the election. What are the issues they have considered? They have considered past conduct of the party. That's simple as such. They have considered, they can remember what happened in the central bank. And that the suffering, the impact it has on every individual, still we have that impact. They can remember the laws that they are going to pass to satisfy the foreign concern, which is detrimental to the sovereignty of the country. So they can remember the purported constitutional changes the government, the UMPS wanted to do to separate the country. And then
Okay, so,
so many things.
Majid,
When you say
all these
19th
Majid, can I answer?
amendment, when you say
Majid,
when you say that these
Majid,
amendments
can I answer? Okay,
So,
I'll take three. Okay,
these-
central
these-
bank. Okay.
these- I mean, they have done it.
Kanishka,
They have-
okay, I'll answer three areas.
Let me finish it. I mean, you cannot blame the people. The people have their own ways of judging and coming to conclusion, and on their judgment, they have decided to whom to vote or not to vote. Not to vote is also their own decision. That's a democratic right of the people. It's a constitutional right. So they exercise their constitutional right, and after evaluating the past conduct of each candidate and the party. So that is simple as that.
Harsha, do you
So
feel
you
that
can
if the
anticipate
4.8
the
million
knowledge of the
voters
people.
had turned out, do you think they still
Majid, I must re-emphasize here, I never blamed the voters. If anyone in this panel challenges that I blame voters, please
No.
rewind this and show me.
It is not a
Right?
blaming.
No, I didn't blame.
You
No, I didn't blame.
You said you specifically said you are not blaming. I can remember
Yes,
that.
so you use the word blame, and this is SLPP political twist. They use a word and they play with the word and they establish that. Now, for example,
that is not a political
I mean,
that is not a
Kanishka, now, I mean, we have
I
observed
say the reason
political-
why voters behaved in this manner. There's a reason, and there's a reason for the voters to behave in the manner.
so
there's a
we
reason for the
consider that.
SLFPP to get 2/3 majority in the parliament.
If I say SLPP won only because of Gotabaya Rajapaksa and Mahinda Rajapaksa, that would hurt many SLPP people, because we know how the infights are occurring, right? Come another 1 year or 2 years,
are not concerned
and we will
about
see with the collapse of the Rajapaksa regime how the SLPP work.
We are not
and we are
concerned about
lucky.
the Rajapaksa. I was concerning focusing on the voters. Why they behaved in that, why they voted.
So I'm also answering to the accusation of whatever the argument that you brought
I have
up.
given
So,
reason out.
what I feel is, Majid, next 5 years is very important for Sri Lanka. With all due respect to Mr. Kanishka, and majority of the people who are sitting here are the youth. Now, so the youth are going to take the responsibility of this country. Even SLPP, I must tell that out of your candidates, most of the youth candidates won. So that's a clear indication that the country needs more youthful candidates, young blood. I mean, you would agree with that. So
Yeah,
I mean,
that's correct.
yeah, without any ill feeling, I am considering this fact. No, I mean, in earlier politics, we would never appreciate the opposition, or we would not assess a good point of opposition. But we do that. I mean, the youth candidates won, SLPP youth candidates won. So I am a casualty, but doesn't matter. Why?
Can we also say this? Young people won, but majority of the cabinet comprises of 70 plus people.
These are the challenges that we need to address. What I feel is, now we have to create a country where the youth representative political parties have to be apolitical in many issues if we are actually going to reshape this country to where we were maybe before independence. I would even trace back to period of post-independence, because when you read the history of this country, I think post-independence would have been the best period for this country. I mean,
Maybe, yeah.
I mean, with the current division among the population. I mean, before independence, we all, Muslims, Tamils, Sinhalese, Burghers, Catholics, everyone fought together to win the independence. No sooner we won the independence, then we wanted a bigger share.
Divide and conquer.
So today, what has happened? So today we are fighting for a bigger share. So all in all, what I would propose is that the young blood, the youth, and the senior citizens, or rather the senior personalities like you all, should help all the youth candidates in each and every political parties to think broad and think the essential priorities in the best interest of the country. Otherwise, this political haggle will continue for years and years, and maybe 10-15 years I may also be expired. I may also be an old man.
I think President had a good chance of changing this dynamics by bringing fresh blood to the cabinet, but then they went and appointed, they gave positions to the age-old politicians who, I mean, the structured, the established politicians who were with them. So President had that opportunity, and also there were new people who came in from the Vietmaga who topped the list. They could have been brought into the cabinet. These changes could have been made. I think that was one of some of the things that the people were expecting this novelty to be brought in. So these are the factors.
I mean, it's like a broken record almost. It's just going round and round, repeating the same. Whether it's, I'm not saying that the SLPP's cabinet appointments or ministerial appointments are right or wrong. But if you look, like both of you, the Yapalne appointments. Look at the professionals that contested in the 2015 general election from the UNFGG, the United National Front for Good Governance, who didn't end up getting cabinet ministries either, because the cabinet ministries went to same old.
See, then again, this is a question. Now we are in 2020. I, as a young politician, I can either justify my party or I can be critical. I think we going forward, rather than justifying what is wrong, let's say what is wrong. If you want to, if you envision change in this country, leaders who come in should be bold enough to make the change. Now that is what is not happening in the country, because you say educated people should be given nomination, but you end up not giving them nomination. So, and we see the same faces back in parliament. So even how is this country going to go forward? So these are the things that the general public needs.
So will we see, like for example in your party, the Samagi Jana Balawege, will we see that difference when it comes time to call nominations for the provincial council?
Certainly, we are pushing for it. 25% should be given to youth and also to ladies going forward, because I think it's mandatory that new faces are brought in, because the political landscape in Sri Lanka needs to change, and only fresh blood, young blood can bring in this difference. Because, and also we are in a digital age, things are changing, politics needs to move in from this welfare politics to policy based politics, also as opposed to I mean more political sound debating, where people candidates come and argue on policies, on things that they can do, versus going and distributing rice bags and trying to grab the vote. So it is, even if the youth are brought in to given nominations, they must do a different kind of politics, not do the same old politics that the age-old candidates were doing. So this is the difference that needs to happen in this country. So I think people also have a requirement to push for these changes and reject the wrong people and appoint the right people.
I must say the present cabinet also consisting of youth parliamentarians. I mean, it is not purely completely with you get so many young ministers in the cabinet, and also so many in the state ministries. You get several.
And one of the youngest cabinet ministers in history.
Sorry?
One of the youngest cabinet ministers.
Yeah, we commend for that appointment. I think he duly deserves.
Honorable Namals. Yeah, I mean,
we commend
he deserves it. See, Majid, now, if I add to what Lihini said, I think we need to study the whole political landscape in this country. What I feel is, Majid, in all parties, the seniors have a legacy in these parties. So, 5 times one person has won 5 times, that means he has been in parliament for 25 years. So he has a certain vote base, and so he actually meddle with that vote base. So some senior politicians have a list of the jobs that they have given 25 years ago, right? So they go and push on that. So this is something that we need to gradually change. I always believe the voters should also know same person doesn't have to be sent to parliament all the time. Say I be in parliament for 5 years or 10 years, then people reject me or let me be at home, then I will think of an industry and some survival. So what happens is, when you are in parliament for 3 times, so naturally it becomes a profession, and then the 4th and the 5th time they win by hook or crook. Now none of us are affected by that because we have respective professions. So this I have seen this in UNP, SLFP and all political parties. So maybe I am proposing things that people wouldn't have heard, or people would have heard but would not discuss in public.
So this time around, the public have rejected, I think, 60 plus members of the former party.
Which is a good sign. Which is a very good sign. See, Majid, what happens is, when a politician thinks that his only job is politics, and he has given up the job that he has mastered hither to become a politician, then they will only dwell in politics. So if this country can be changed to a situation where, okay, people of Kandy elects Mahesh Ranayaka, and after 5 years or 10 years assess, and then they not reject, they prevent me from going to parliament so that I can do my homework. Now, nearest neighboring India, if you look at, no person has become a president by being in Lok Sabha forever. So 5 years they are in Lok Sabha, or then 5 years in the state chambers, then they go home. I mean, famous example is Jayalalitha of Tamil Nadu. She has not been in the state council or whatever the term that says. So they have not been the apex body forever. So they get defeated, they go home, do their homework, come back, make a... So that way, politicians will also have a commitment towards winning an election on a genuine platform. Here in Sri Lanka, what I have learned, being a new candidate, sometimes the political the platforms are de facto platforms. Now, see, people demand for educated young blood, experience. But when you go to village, that is not the most crucial point people look for.
They want
you have to, I mean, if I say it in Sinhala manner, Mama, Nanda, Malli, Ayya, so that's the jargon that they expect politicians to do. I mean, which is not wrong.
Can I add something now? What are voters, are people, what do they expect from a politician? A politician should be a person who legislates, who should have the knowledge to go to parliament and argue on policy. But our politicians are people who go for funerals and parties and who are present. Now, that is what the people expect. And also giving jobs to people, and that is what they expect from a politician.
This time there's a change.
We have to give some time for Kanishka as well. Yes, Kanishka.
Yeah, this time I think the people have decided otherwise, because people have considered about the background, the education and qualifications, the experience, and so many other concerns, and the patriotism.
To some extent, in certain instances.
Certainly.
Yeah. But so then now you get a different set of peer parties, new faces in the parliament now, especially from SLPP. So many, but 50% of new faces have now come in.
Thank you. On that note, we'll go in for a short commercial break. We're almost nearing the end of the program. Face the Nation will be right back. Welcome back to Face the Nation. If you're just joining us, we're involved in a lively and engaging discussion on the political discourse in Sri Lanka with Attorney at Law Kanishka Vitharana, Attorney at Law Lihini Fernando, and also who's also a member of the Moratuwa Municipal Council representing the SJB, Samagi Jana Balawegaya, and Mr. Mai Senanayake, who was a candidate for the Kandy district at the concluded general election representing the United National Party. We're also joined by Jaimal Ratnayaka and John Fernando representing News First. Next Q&A session, over to you, gentlemen.
Thank you, Nadeem. My question will be to Kanishka. Let's talk about delayed justice. Now, we saw there were several allegations leveled against the Hapalne government, one being the infamous bond scam. And we saw presidential commissions being appointed. We saw certain people being apprehended and the legal procedure going on and on. What will President Gotabaya Rajapaksa's government do to ensure that justice is not delayed, that it is meted out to those who deserve it?
No, I mean, there's a procedure as such. Now, the delay is something coming up as a result of the procedure which is now practicing. Now, whatever, it is not the president who should do with regard to the procedure is concerned with regard. It is the parliament who should pass new laws to cut short the procedure. Now, delays can happen at the state of investigation. The process might take long time. But sometimes you must have new laws to expedite the investigation stage. And the court should have some sort of some sort of authority to regulate the investigation process. And the court procedure from the time of filing of a plaint or an indictment or charge sheet, the trial process takes time, and getting evidence. And you must have, earlier there was an attempt to have more courthouses for specific purposes. So likewise, it is something the parliament has to go into by enacting new laws and processes. Other than that, I mean, so many, in the past several years now, we have tested with so many ways to cut short this process, procedure, to avoid delays. Now, this is because of the system that we practice. We have to give a hearing to both sides. We have to call evidence and give time for them to find out evidence. We must have time to go through the investigation. So that is naturally consume time. So that is a culmination of that is the entire process. The total delay is resulted by adding up of all this
But
time
Kanishka,
frame.
what is a reasonable time frame? I mean, on average in Sri Lanka, if I'm not mistaken, this is mentioned by a fairly senior, currently a justice, that on average it takes 10 to 11 years
Not
for
10 to
a criminal case to be settled. Is that a reasonable amount of time?
No, it's not a reasonable
And we're seeing cases
time.
of, I mean, we were talking earlier about issue of challenges, issues or problems facing women in Sri Lanka. There are cases involving rape, which take where a girl is raped as a child and she's almost 30 by the time the rapist has been punished. What is a reasonable time frame? As someone from within the legal fraternity, actually,
No, I believe that whatever the cases, maybe especially a case like this, should be concluded at least within 2 years, because there should be a process. We can avoid. We can give us as a temporary solution for the moment. If you take the existing procedure, we can have a separate court to hear these special cases and expedite these matters concerning women and children.
But isn't that why they introduced the Judicature, the amendment, the act, which introduced special courts for corruption-related cases? But even those, even after the courts were established, the trial at bar, that also seems to be sort of...
That's against it. They have to follow the existing criminal procedure.
Criminal procedure.
Because we have to change. It's now the new thinking, new blood, new members of the parliament have to think of new ways to do some amendments to existing procedures and expedite it, because it is not the government who should do it. It's the parliament. Actually, the government has to initiate its bills, acts.
Also technology will be brought
But
in.
is the code, are the procedures holding the law enforcement authorities back? Because, for example, if you look at the 2012 murder of a tourist, of a British tourist, Khurram Sheikh, 2012 if I'm not mistaken, that case, I believe, mainly probably due to pressure exerted from overseas, that case went through the High Court. It's currently on appeal in the Supreme Court, if I'm not mistaken. But I mean, the speed with which that case was resolved, you don't see, no two criminal cases should be compared to one another because the circumstances might be different. But when you look at the time frames that are taken for like high-profile cases like that, and then you look at some cases where there aren't even suspects, like in the case of the killing of Wasim Tajuddin, there isn't even a suspect yet. I mean, that raises some serious questions about law enforcement, right? Shouldn't Parliament, shouldn't like officers of the law be hauled up before oversight committees in Parliament and ask these questions in public?
Yeah, there should be some laws guiding time frames, because sometimes this court administration in the hands of a judge. Judge can give dates. Now, depending on dates after cases come up to reach the level of the entered into the court process by after reading the indictment or the charge sheet or after filing the plaint. It is in the hands of the judge. Judge can decide the time of a case.
But I think also the minimum standards need to be brought in and technology needs to be brought in, because our court system, I think the way it operates, it's like the same age-old mechanism, the procedure. I think technology needs to be brought in. Courthouses need to be made like, now for example, the procedural, it takes quite a long time. So all these, I think, let's say on a clean slate approach needs to come in to administering justice, and laws also need to be passed so that justice will not be delayed, I think.
Majid, if you allow me to take a little hint from his answer now, both of them agreed, being in the legal profession, they agreed that you brought the trial at bar, special trial at bar as example, but the cases will have to be follow the criminal procedure code and the civil
Civil
procedure code.
procedure, yes.
Now, one of the accusations against Yahapalana government was that the Yahapalana government did not put people in jail. But you can't put a person in jail without proper investigation, proper proof. I mean, one of the accusations for Yahapalana government was like Yahapalana government did not put the politicians who were accused in the previous regime into jail and
It's
punished.
not the job of the government to put people in jail.
No,
that's the job of the police and the courts.
No, that's what I'm trying to say. So there are a lot of cumbersome procedures that needs to be streamlined in the best interest of the country. So as he said, even Parliament will have to take a firm decision to action this and make necessary changes. I mean,
See, for example, when a case goes, you can take technical objections. Then there are technical objections. Parties are given chances to file written submissions. So there are mechanisms to delay procedures. So these are things that, as I said, the
But
procedure needs to be
if you sort of take away those procedures, are you denying due process to people who are accused? If you sort of streamline those processes simply with the purpose of expediting justice, will it? And that's the other question, right? Will it end up in a situation?
So there has to be balance. There has to be balance.
Expedite means expediting, but you have to give consideration to the evidence. This process should be there, and also the delay might happen at the stage of investigation. Now there may be some allegations against the previous government or so forth. I'm not sure about this. There were instances we see undue delays at the stage of investigation. You are not apprehending the culprits or accused suspects. You, the suspect,
especially in the case of, especially when it involves high-profile politicians.
That is the main allegation the Yahapalana government faced.
Investigation. That's right.
But is it because investigators are fearful?
Yeah, because
sometimes they work hand in glove.
That is something that we have to give consideration with the process of making a new constitution also, because the police is involved in the investigation process. Now, we are trying to make the police independent from the executive interference, from the direct interference of the executive by having a police commission, but it's not also that's also not working well. So still the police, because police derives its power authority directly from the head of the executive, it's an executive arm. So we must try to see a mechanism in the future to see when we make the new constitution where the police can engage in their.
Do you have any proposals on how this can be achieved, Kanishka, on how we can ensure that the police are independent?
We have to see because we must have some laws, give some liberty, authority, some independence to the police to go ahead with the investigation.
We brought in under 19th Amendment of the Constitution. I get a fear that you all are attempting to disband the 19th Amendment Constitution.
19th Amendment, there are so many problems because 19th Amendment didn't work, no? When the police commission and other commissions are concerned, even election commission.
Kanishka, do you feel like the establishments of the independent commissions was a good move?
Independent commission is a good move, but independent appointment to independent commission is something we have to
done by the Constitutional Council.
Because the Constitutional Council is not workable because it's a political body.
So, but that political body represents everyone. President's representative, government, opposition.
It's technically defective. See, the head of it's chaired by the speaker. Speaker is a part of the legislature. Speaker, technically, constitutionally, the Constitutional Council never derives power either from the executive or the legislature. How can you define the status of the Constitutional Council, whether it's a legislative arm or the executive arm? You can't say that because it's a defective body. That's why it's not working. It's not workable.
But
we must have some council as what you had in the 17th Amendment, where it is not chaired by the Speaker. 17th Amendment is drafted by Mr. Mendes. I can remember, as far as I can remember. It is done very well. So like that, we had some good pieces of legislation. So we can go into when we are concerned.
So do you think the SLPP will give due consideration to these issues when amending when either amending the constitution or introducing a new constitution, are you confident that the issues that you have raised regarding the importance of the independence of the police, the need, as you said, the need to restructure or to rethink the composition of the Constitutional Council?
Yes,
do you think
because
that
I can
these
say-
these sort of ideas will be given a fair hearing in this constitution making process?
And also it's important to get the participation of experts in making the constitution, because as I said earlier, the 17th Amendment was drafted by a very expert constitutionalist, Mr. D.L. Mendes, who is now present serving as a member of the PSC. But he has some international background and experience on this. He has drafted the 17th Amendment to the Constitution. In that, you get the Constitution. For example, the Election Commission was consisting of 5 members. 3 is the quorum. So that would have functioned very well. But now we have 3 members, 3 is the quorum. It's not functioning well. So one can have authority over the entirety, because that is not workable. That's why we had some recent speculative issues with regard to the Election Commission. So like that, we must get the participation of this expertise in the drafting and making of the Constitution.
On the subject of Constitution drafting, as the SJB and the UNP, do you all see any point at which you can work collaboratively or participatorily with the SLPP government in the process of constitution making?
I think the key salient factors of the 19th Amendment should remain, because now one of the election promises that has been coming from right from 1994 is the powers of the executive was the overpowered executive. So the control between the president and the prime minister, reducing the powers of the president, was one of the key factors of the 19th Amendment. I think that was a good move that happened. So do we secure that? Then also the independent commissions.
The Kanishka's argument that the 19th Amendment, it didn't really separate the powers of the executive. It sort of divided it up between 2 individuals and therefore destabilized the country. Do you feel that argument has made?
So the issue is they are looking at it because the president was of one party and the prime minister was of the other party. But if it is from both are from the same party, then the situation would be different.
But when you're making a constitution or constitutional amendment, you should take into consideration the fact that this is possible, because it has happened before. We had President Chandika Bandaranaike Kumaratunga and Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe. So it is a possibility. Do you think that this was not and I mean, when the 19th Amendment was drafted, they already knew that the President is from another party and the Prime Minister is from another party. Do you feel that these issues were considered?
Majid, if you really read this 19th Amendment of the Constitution and 17th Amendment, there's a huge improvement on the 19th Amendment from the 17th Amendment and 18th Amendment, because the 18th Amendment, according to my opinion, was the worst ever amendment that was brought to the 78th Constitution, because one person is vested with so much of power, right? So having understood that, the experts propose, okay, these executive powers have to be crippled to an extent that one person will not be given supreme power over parliament. So which is a good improvement when it comes to 19th Amendment of the Constitution. And 19th Amendment of the Constitution provides for checks and balances between executive and the legislature, right? In that context, I believe what the parliament should do and even the political parties should do is to work together to better the 19th Amendment. Otherwise, not to take a U-turn. Now, I think late Jaya Jayawardena once said, how you put the constitution to good use is in the hands of the person who uses it. I mean, it's like the interpretation. Like interpretation of the clause in the constitution depends on the circumstance. I mean, both of you know better than I do. So, likewise, it should be in the good spirit of the persons who are involved with the constitution making or using of the constitution. So, I believe if there are things that needs to be improved, it needs to be improved, it needs to be furthered, but not take a complete U-turn.
Like RTI Act and all are good moves. That's the epitome of democracy, I would say, the Right to Information Act. So those things need to continue. And if there are issues in the composition of the independent commissions, yes, they.
I'll give a good
The newly
example.
appointed subject minister has committed to uphold.
Also, there is no Ministry of Parliamentary Affairs is also no more, I would.
Yeah, no, just on the subject of the Right to Information Act, the line minister, being the Minister of Media, has on his upon assuming duties said that this would a priority for his ministry would be to uphold the Right to Information Act and to ensure the smooth functioning of the RTI Commission.
Majid, it is a very good sign. If you look at past 5 years after RTI came into power, if you look at comparatively the number of cases which were filed against journalists or media houses were limited, because the complainant or the person who wants to sue a particular media organization or journalist ultimately found that the journalist or the media house have got the correct information through the RTI. I think that is a very good sign. And also journalists too can't just disseminate information or news items without proof, because see, if someone throws mud at me, slings mud at me, I can question where did you get this information. So you have a passage to obtain information. So in that context, I think Kanishka, you would also agree it's a right balance.
I'm confident now. If you are going for an amendment, still you don't remove Article 14 from the Constitution. It will be there.
It has to be there.
It should be there. It is there. It will be there. I don't think it is a fundamental right newly introduced by the 19th Amendment. You are not going to do away with the entirety of the 19th Amendment. Article 14 will be there, but there will be changes, should be changes in the composition of the Constitutional Councils and the power of the President to dissolve the Parliament. There might be sometimes. Also,
may I ask one question? Majid, can I?
Let's just finish. Allow Kanishka to finish.
Now, the president, head of the executive. Now, this is the theory. Now, the people of the country at the parliament presidential election entrust the executive power in the hands of the president. Now, Article 4 says, according to Article 4 of the Constitution, the executive power should be exercised by the executive president and the cabinet of ministers. Now, what of the mistakes done by the draftsman in the 19th Amendment was to remove that power from the president and try to vest it in the hands of the executive or that is against the Constitution. That's why the Supreme Court held. I got the judgment also. This particular sentence, may I read it from the judgment? Thus, permitting the Prime Minister to exercise the executive power in relation to the 6 paragraphs referred to above had to be struck down as being the excess of authority and violative of Article 3. Article 3 means the people give the power to the president.
The people's executive power is exercised by the
expect the president to exercise it through the cabinet of ministers, state ministers, and
not the prime minister.
Through the process of government. It can be taken out, taken away from the president and this process and give it in the hands of the prime minister.
Just before we go in,
this is there. This in terms of the design, this mechanism is still there in this 19th Amendment. Then it leads to a confusion in the system of government. That's why you say that in Saharan's issue, there's no person to be accountable to the information that been received. Then the president says, I don't know, and he's passing the ball to the prime minister. Prime minister says it's the president who's responsible, because the head of the executive, there's no clear head of executive to be found in the process of the constitutional government. There's no line of accountability. So this confusion should be immediately corrected by going for a clear executive head in the new
was responsible.
Thank you, Kanishka. Mahesh, Lihini, if you want to add something to what
we
Kanishka is saying,
we
very
would not,
quickly
we
within
would
a
not
minute.
fully agree with what
Agree with
Mr.
that.
Kanishka said. Now, if you look at the Constitutional Council, it is clearly mentioned who are the members here: the Speaker to Prime Minister, then the Leader of the Opposition, Member of Parliament appointed by the President, so on and so forth. 5 persons appointed by the President, then 1 Member of Parliament nominated by agreement of the majority of the members of Parliament belonging to political parties or independent groups. So it is quite vivid and clear. But what I am again saying is that if there are things that needs to
I
be
think
improved.
Kanishka's point there was that the composition of the Constitutional Council is made up of both legislative and executive sort of parts, because there is the President nominee, the Prime Minister nominee, and therefore that is what makes it dysfunctional.
Yeah, but most of them are the sitting members of the Parliament. So that they are the,
but
they are the
Mahesh,
people
if
who
you
are
go by,
responsible
if
of
there
making
is
law.
a committee on high posts in Parliament, why can't these appointments be?
So
sent
hither to
the
19th
Committee on
Amendment
High
of the
Posts?
Constitution,
That was
all
my
these high
response.
post committees have worked in a very biased manner. It is very clear. Majid, now say, I agree with him that the executive power of the President is exercised by the Department of Police. Say, if I am the President, now you are my friend and I appoint you as the IGP. Now this was a question we had no. So I think even Mr. Gotabaya Rajapaksa, a man with international exposure, would want to change this culture. I see that he is genuinely trying to do that change. Maybe the seasoned politicians wouldn't want that. We want that kind of change. But as he said, at no point country's sovereignty should be put into jeopardy. Like in the Zaharan's case, it was Mr. Maithpal Sirisena who was lucky enough to get 110,000 votes from Poland. I think the luckiest of the worst presidents ever this country had, right? He said, I didn't know. In that kind of scenario, yes, we also have a question, okay, who is going to be responsible?
For the security.
So, 19th Amendment or whatever the amendment that is going to come to play or come to power, should not compromise the sovereignty of the country, because then it is going to be an infringement upon the youth of this nation. Because I fear a situation where these divisions among political parties and the majority Sinhalese and the other communities will come to a situation where in 10 or 15 years time, people will not see eye to eye. There may be a lot of communal clashes. So that is the worry that I am looking at. So in my opinion, any constitutional changes or any improvements, Kanishka, you would agree with me, should bring all hearts together, all Sri Lankans together. If the constitution breaks people into tiny little groups, how can we grow as a country? That is the question which begs answer from us.
Thank you, Mahesh, Lihini and Kanishka. We're going for a short commercial break. When we come back, it's the final round of Face the Nation. Welcome back to Face the Nation. This is the final round. We're engaged in a lively discussion with Attorney at Law Kanishka Vitarna, Attorney at Law Lihini Fernando, member of the Moroto Municipal Council representing the SJB, and Mr. Mahesh Senanayake, a candidate for the Kandy district at the concluded general election representing the UNP. This final round, Mahesh, I'd like to start with you. Moving forward from this point, you now have a two-thirds majority for the SLPP. The party in government has a two-thirds majority with its partners in the EPDP, TMVP, so on and so forth. What do you think should be the priorities in the next 6 months to a year for the government, for those in
for the government?
Parliament? Not just the government, but even for legislators in the opposition.
Right.
What should be the priority?
I think the priority should be to put the economy into the right place. See, even before the elections, we mentioned this in many occasions and we highlighted that the biggest challenges we are facing are the economic challenges due to COVID-19 crisis and even certain mishandling by the government soon after the new president was put in place or came to power. For example, cutting off taxes, the value-added taxes that actually affected the government's revenue to dwindle by 25% or 27% by February 2020. So thereafter, COVID-19 crisis occurred. So with that, we see 40 to 47% of the national income would not realize this year. So that is going to be a huge challenge. Whoever who's in power will have to face it. So I believe the priority of the government should be to put the economy back. In that context, government will have to encourage more foreign investments. Government will have to find avenues to earn more foreign exchange. The remittances from the Sri Lankans working abroad will be a big question in the current climate, in current scenarios in the Middle East. So that the government should give priority to short-term economic gains. And I believe in new Keynesian economy, where the debate is whether a government should spend more public funds or government should increase the public expenditure or cripple. Now, after COVID-19, Kanishka, the whole world is looking at a safety net. So these are the challenges that any government, even if we were in power, will have to look into expand the welfare economy, because the people would expect a certain safety from the government when a crisis occurs like this. So these challenges are genuine challenges, and unfortunately people like us would have been in parliament to contribute towards this kind of discussions. So I hope and pray the members who are in parliament would take these kind of new thinking and work with government or opposition to benefit the people from these discussions that take place in parliament. So my priority or my request to government is, please look into the economic hurdles. Now, for example, I represent the travel trade as well. Travel trade has been raised to the ground at the moment, because I mean it's natural. So I know it's a challenge to the government as well, but government cannot just turn a blind eye, because there are 1 million people who are employed in this industry directly or indirectly. So putting economy to its previous status, maybe not fully, at least to a sustainable level, is the biggest challenge. Then I request the government, and I hope the SJB, being the main opposition, in fact they are also part of us, so we believe that the opposition will be able to put a stern and firm reactions to the government if the government is trying to make unsavory or undesirable constitutional changes. Because if we have won something, I think the constitutional rights given in during the last 4.5 years or 5 years is one of the biggest people achieved, like 19th Amendment, RTI, human rights, media freedom and all that. So I feel the parliament will not touch the sovereignty of the country as well as the power of the people or rights of the people, because UNP.
Thank you, Mahesh.
Yeah.
Right, our time will end it there. Mahesh Senanayake is hopeful that the parliament will not touch the sovereignty of the country or the rights and freedoms of the people. On that note, I'd like to come to you, Attorney at Law Kanishka Vitharana. What do you think should be the government's or the parliament's, the newly elected MPs, both government and what do you think should be their priorities in the next 6 months to a year?
So if you take the two words that you mentioned about the sovereignty of the people and the parliamentarians, what they should do now is, first, we have to do away with all the laws that be enacted during the past 5 years which has an impact on the sovereignty of the people. For example, there are laws that made the country subject to the universal jurisdiction, which is in conflict with the sovereignty of the people of the country, and also has a bad impact on the economy. For example, the newly enacted tax law, Inland Revenue Act, which has totally disregarded the concessions given to the various industries, which is detrimental to the economy. And also there should be laws which deals with the banking sector, because the banking sector is now is doing sometimes act as a mafia on its own, because we are not concerned, there are no discussion about how the banks is working and functioning. The bank has a very big role to play in the development and in the economy. So we must have systems, because for the best example is recently cabinet has taken the decision to give concessions to various industries through banking system. It was gone to the central bank. It was very lethargic attitude the central bank has taken to implement it through the banking system. Anyway, the central bank issued a circular that couldn't be implemented through the banking system. For example, the cabinet has decided not to look into the crib when granting short-term loans for the COVID affected people. But still, as of today, it is not been implemented. So that's why we must, the parliamentarians as government should create new systems to cope up with the situations like that. There are so many laws in this country as concerned. Various departments, ministries are working and functioning independent of each other. There's no coordination among themselves. So we must have new system and new systems to put in place through that's a big role. I mean, when it comes to the responsibilities, duties and expectations from the MPs is so vast. They have there's a immense of so many matters that have to consider when the parliamentarian is concerned. But we are heading to a new constitution as well, because the purpose of this constitution is to keep the unity among the people. We have to take a new big step, new drive towards the development of the economy. It should be very fast move. For that, we must do away with all the constitutional obstacles. The entire country, all the people should act as one family under one leadership and under one governance. So to facilitate that, we must do whatever the changes that should be done in the constitution. As Mahesh said, we should see that separations, deviations among the communities is not happening anymore. We must do whatever the constitutional obstacles to overcome that and to have an efficient government machinery and mechanism to put in place for the development of the country.
Thank you very much, Attorney at Law Kanishka Vitharna. And finally, tonight we have Attorney at Law Lihini Fernando, member of the Moratuwa Municipal Council representing the Samagi Janabala Wege. Lihini, your thoughts. Over the next 6 months to a year, what should be the priorities of the government and the newly elected legislators?
Yeah. One of the things I like to highlight is countries which are corrupted will never go in for development. So how will the government have a corrupt-free governance system? That is one of the key things I think the government needs to focus on. To do that, they need to implement proper systems, processes, procedures, and also bringing in technology, digitalization. So these are key factors that the government must consider, and also to do away with age-old laws that results in bureaucracy. And how will government officials be far more accountable? How will parliamentarians be more accountable? Shouldn't KPIs, key performance indicators, measurable factors be brought in to these parliamentarians? Now, whoever who are assigned ministries, will these ministries be profitable entities, or will these ministries just be another ministry per se? So these are questions that the president needs to ask, and also new projects, new projects that are being brought in. What is the ultimate result that it is going to generate to the people? Because something which we know is that the government funds, the utilization of government funds, does it actually at the end of the day result in benefits for the people? So the entire operational procedure of the government has to be looked at in a holistic perspective. And also another fact is racism. I think this whole divide and conquer, religion wise, nationality wise, this whole racist mentality I think should be do away with in this country, and have the whole notion that we are all Sri Lankans, and the Sri Lankan ideology I think should be brought forward. And last but I'd like to say the rights of the women and the children should be given paramount importance, because we are the 52% and the children are 25%, and we should not be put into the backburner of this country. And leaders must be empathetic. Not just rulers, and development, not just only infrastructural development, but human development, welfare of the people needs to be considered. So we has to, at the end of the day, we have to have happy people. A nation, happiness index, happiness should be a key factor. So these are the things, and we socially, infrastructurally, economically, as well as safeguarding our democratic rights. I think that is the way forward for Sri Lanka.
Thank you, Lihini Fernando, attorney at law, member of the Moratuwa Municipal Council, representing the Samiki Jana Balawegaya. Thank you also to Mahesh Senanayaka, candidate at the concluded general election from the Kandy district, representing the United National Party. Thank you also to attorney at law Kanishka Vitharana. Thank you all three of you for accepting our invitation to join us today. It's been a very interesting discussion on the political discourse in Sri Lanka. Thank you very much, Jayamal Ratnayaka and John Fernando as well, for asking the right questions. So we discussed constitutional amendments. We went into the topic of women's and children's affairs. We've talked about the journey forward as well, the priorities that our newly elected legislators should have, both government and in the opposition. I'll leave you tonight with the thoughts that I opened with at the beginning of this program, which is that discourse and critical thinking are essential tools for progress in any democratic society. But at the end of the day, it is unity and engaged participation that will ensure that progress happens. Good night and good luck.